Welcome to the Mantic Universe podcast. I'm Clem, and today in this short episode, I will talk about my favorite Kings of War topic with Mark. Mark, finally we're putting small-scale Kings of War under the spotlight.
There you go. Can Chris handle it?
Well, he's not here today, so worst case scenario, you can always skip the episode and just not listen to it. I guess that's one big advantage of the MEP shorts, right?
I guess so. That or listen to it and end up in an institution somewhere. But we'll do our best to make sure Chris survives.
Yes. So, first of all, maybe we can quickly say a word about what is even Kings of War small scale, because it's not really an official thing, right?
No, it's not an official thing at all. It's just something that you kind of do. And people have been doing for a long time. So, and from the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like, I should say, that we're going to get it official anytime soon, but we'll see. But I mean, when I started, I just kind of followed War Master, but then I quickly got out of that. So, but how about you, Clem?
Yeah, I mean, I thought more about it, and you know what? The very first game of Kings of War that I ever played was in small scale, because that's when I got back into the tabletop hobby in 2016 or something. So it was second edition Kings of War, and I actually got a rule book, but I didn't have any miniature or anything to play it with, or I didn't know anyone who played it. And I thought, you know what? It looks like these rule sets only requires the footprint of the unit. I bet I can, just cut cardboard cutouts, and I don't have to make them full size. I can maybe divide everything by two, and it will still work, and it will work on my kitchen table. That would be cool to just, give it a try on my own. And then I even played a few games with Sarah, so my girlfriend at the time. And so there is no official version for it, and it's just anyone can come up with their own version of it. And but I think it's pretty cool. So one immediate conclusion or consequence rather of there not being any official version is there are different ways of doing it. So in general, the main idea is you don't use the official miniatures at 28mm scale or Warhammer Fantasy or AOS models or whatever other models, but you need different ones. And so I've seen people do all sorts of things. As you mentioned, there are War Master miniatures and units. So that's the 10mm fantasy game from Games Workshop that is now not published anymore. I don't know when they stopped publishing it. Do you remember that, Mark?
Boy, it was in the early 2000s. So definitely. I think it was launched in the year 2000 and it lasted a couple of years. It was, although what Rick Priestley calls his best game he ever designed, it was a commercial flop for GW. So it didn't really survive, but it survives today as War Master Revolution or something like that. So people are still playing it and still producing miniatures for it, and not from just one little backroom shop. There's a number of people producing great 10mm miniatures for fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on an interesting part, and that potentially is one reason why there isn't an official way to do this from Mantic. It's because obviously different scale means you need an entirely new line of miniatures. And as we've seen with Epic Warpath, of course they use the same designs, like the same style for models, but they have been resculpting every single one of them, because when you change the scale and you want to do it seriously, then you need to sculpt them differently. And so I guess that's quite an investment and quite an involved thing to do for them. And I guess perhaps for Games Workshop and War Master back in the day, that was also a reason why it was a bit hard to get on the market or get good sales, because it is an entirely new scale, and so maybe it's not as appealing to people. But personally, I think there are tons of advantages to the smaller scale. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention, you said War Master. From War Master, you can use several things. You can use the miniatures themselves, or what I've seen people do as well is use the specific bases, because War Master models are based in stands. So every single unit is made of several stands, and the stands are 20 by 40 millimeters, I believe.
That is correct.
Yeah, and so if you want to use that for Kings of War, then you can either just don't bother and just use 20 by 40 for an infantry troop or something. So it's not exactly half size, but it's pretty close. Or what I've done for some players locally, if you want to be more compatible with half dimensions, is make adapter bases. Um, I think we should mention that another big way that people are playing Kings of War in smaller scale is instead of dividing every dimension by two, they convert every inch centimeter measurement into centimeter measurement. So it's kind of like dividing by 2.5, roughly. Um, yeah, so again, that's a bit of a disadvantage that there isn't one unified version to do it, that people do a bit of everything. Um, what have
Yeah,
you
that
finally decided what you're going to be doing for yours, Mark?
Yes, I'm going to follow the half size revolution, so to speak. I'm not going to worry about making them War Master compatible. My chances of sliding back into War Master are pretty much zero at this point. So, but a lot of people do it. Billy Smith wrote some articles over there on Dash 28. These are back from February of 2019, and that's how long we've been playing small scale Kings of War. Um, and he's using the War Master bases for that. So as you mentioned before, for regular infantry, a troop is one base, a regiment is two bases, a horde is four, and a legion is
Yeah,
six. So that's what they were using. Because I have the 3D printer, could just print half-size bases. So I found some Kings of War bases online, just set them to go to half scale and print away. So just use a zero point 0.4 millimeter nozzle on the FDM printer, and voila, I've got a base.
yeah, it just works perfectly, and then the machine has no trouble, printing at 50% scale. That's no big deal for it at all. Like even if measurement ends up in 62.5 millimeters, which sounds a bit ridiculous. Well, it just fits that way for the printer, and the printer will just do that beautifully, and it just works. Um, yeah, I think for me, so the second time that I actually started playing Kings of War small scale is because I saw a video by what's his name? Geeks Gaming Scenery, I think. I think he stopped publishing videos on YouTube, but he had a couple of videos, I think, about 3D printing and making Kings of War armies, with 10 millimeter models. And when I saw him do this, I was blown away because to me that looks really interesting. And I think maybe we can talk a bit about that. Like, why do you even want to play small scale? Um, I can give the counter argument that Chris gives all the time, which is, well, it splits the community. Um, and yes, it is a different way to play the game, but in my opinion, it opens up a new possibility, and it might bring in more player that would otherwise not consider Kings of War. At least that's my experience locally. What's, in your opinion, Mark, is the main advantage or the main attraction to playing Kings of War in a small scale?
Well, one thing is it's a much smaller space because, well, I mean, I play ambush, particularly at 500 points. I can play in a 1.5 by 1.5 space with my 500 point armies. It's great. So it just fits right on the kitchen table. I've actually have a couple different colors of felt squares that I use for it. If we play a bigger game, which we use, gosh, I haven't played a bigger game in a while, but I just use the felt from the fabric store, and it works out great. I don't worry about the neoprene or anything like that. So that's great. I also have 6 armies in one box. It's kind of a little bit larger than a shoebox. So, but I have all my terrain and 6 armies in there. So space is one. Size of the play, and the other thing is they paint up quicker, and nobody can really see
Yeah,
the little miniatures, so you can just kind of hit them with brown, hit them with that 3 colors, 4 colors wash, boom, big thing, hit the spear tips, get the
I agree.
flesh, and give them a unified color, and it's easy to base. I just stick them on the base with some glue and then just hit them with flock, and I'm done. I don't get fancy with it at all. So how about you,
I
Clem?
think, yeah, I think it's interesting that you said they're easier to paint because I totally agree with you. But before I ever painted a 10 mil miniature, I thought, I that's scary. Like they're smaller, and that will be at least twice as hard as painting a big miniature. But that's obviously not true, right? Like you imagine, oh, how can I do all of the things that I do in a 28 mil miniature onto one that is a third of the size? Well, the answer is you don't. You paint them entirely differently, and when you pack them in a dense regiment, you don't even see the legs of the miniatures. So obviously you can make a much simplified paint job, and ultimately it goes a lot faster, I find. And to me it's also a more relaxing thing to paint, um, because my main hurdle when I paint is the decision making, like okay, which areas are representing what, which color will I use for this, and which one will go well with the other colors that I already have. And obviously when you have a much smaller model, then you have less of those decisions to make, and it makes it a lot easier. So for me, it was really the trying something new that looks cute and fits on a small table. And I was also curious about 3D printing at the time, and I thought, well, that's a good project to have when you get a resin printer, um, because obviously with all of the War Master models and other similar systems out there, there are now a bunch of STL files that you can buy, or some of them are even free. And if you have a resin printer or 3D printer yourself, or a friend with a printer, then it's very easy to make an army. So for me, there was kind of the reason to give this a try, like try something different, and yeah, play with a cool smaller version of it. And I have to say, after having done it, um, it, in some aspects, I almost prefer the small scale from how it looks, because with the different scale, you get a completely different view of the battlefield. Like you really get a bird's view, a bird eyes view impression, and I don't know. I just find it look super cool. It's another thing that I liked about War Master, about the idea of War Master, is um, sure, if you just scale everything down by a factor of two, then a 6x4 turns into a 3x2, which is small and fits on any table. But you can also still play on a 6x4 with your tiny miniatures, and then suddenly on a regular gaming table, you can fit 5,000 points per side battles. I know that's 10 times more than what you're more used to, what you really like. But every now and then, if you have the miniatures around, I find it interesting. Like it's more for the optics of it, because from a gaming perspective, it gets a bit messy. Like it takes the whole afternoon. Um, but I find it's pretty cool. Um,
Well, that was Ronnie's kind of vision for Kings of War, was those big giant mass battles, with the thousands of miniatures, so to speak, on each side, and fighting those big epic battles. Well, you can definitely do them in a reasonable space here. I know Blake Schroed runs it at Adepticon. And well, I think the Michigan GT too, on this giant 12-foot table with tons and tons of 28 millimeter miniatures. But that's gigantic. I mean, nobody can put that in their basement. So, well, maybe
yeah,
somebody
that
can.
that's a lot more of an investment in time to paint them, and then to store the whole thing afterward. It's also kind of a nightmare. So I think it's cool and it's fun to look at it, but it's more of one thing you do at a convention, but not something you can do it on a regular basis. Um, Whereas definitely playing small scale Kings of War is a lot more accessible. And I think for me, that's another advantage to it, um, because we've talked about it on many episodes, but um, bringing in more players is always the challenging part of the game, right? Finding new people to play with, or managing to entice people to paint an army, or buy an army and then paint an army and play some games. And at least in my experience, the with the option of doing it with 10 millimeter armies, and then it's not that expensive in the first place, it paints fast, it stores well, then it gives you a chance to entice people who wouldn't otherwise have tried Kings of War to actually give it a go. And as I mentioned earlier, that's kind of what I've done because I've heard about it, almost 10 years ago. And I thought, why not? I mean, that's interesting, but why would I even bother? And then I did my experiments with cardboard and half size. And then you realize that's a very good game. It's a um, very interesting rule set. It's the perfect balance for me. And then later on, I actually got started with an actual 28 millimeter army. And without this first experiments, I might have just never started. So yeah, I think for me, I see it as an alternative. It doesn't replace 28 mil, but it definitely gives people an option who otherwise wouldn't get a chance to be exposed to the greatness of this rule set. So yeah, I guess different angle from doing champions, but ultimately we're all doing the same thing, right? Like bringing in new players.
Absolutely. I mean, the other thing too is you get a travel version. One of the things Luke, I was inspired by that video by Luke as well. Um, and so that's why he was, basically doing it was he created a board that was on the back of a picture frame that he could hang back up on the wall. It's a space thing. Not everybody has a lot of space to work with.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. And nowadays, everything to play a game in half size for Kings of War, like two armies, the terrain, the mat, the dice, everything fits very comfortably in a small backpack, right? So it's a completely different story from transporting a full size, regular size army. So yeah, it's definitely an advantage. Um, yeah, I think to be fair, maybe we can talk a bit about the inconvenience of it. I mentioned one already, like splitting the community, which I not fully agree with. The main issue that I anticipated before getting started is how fiddly it would get, because as we all know, Kings of War is things have to be kind of accurate. Like if you twist a unit a tiny bit, then suddenly a front becomes a flank, or vice versa. And when you have smaller miniatures, like half the size, it can get a bit fiddly. And after playing a good amount of games, like at this point, I've played dozens of games in small scale Skins of War. Yes, it is fiddly, but not that much worse than the full size. And what I mean by that is if you don't play carefully already at 28 millimeter, then it can cause issues. Or if you play with someone who isn't very clean or has a bit of bad will, or maybe it's not fully intentional, but you try to position change facing after routing an enemy unit, and then you realize there's no good way they can place everyone in your front, or if you just moved half an inch to the side, then suddenly there is an angle that works. I won't name names or accuse people, but we've all seen that happen. I think sadly, and obviously when you're half the size, then you don't even need to move half an inch. You need to move a quarter of an inch for the same effect. And then even if you don't have the bad intention to begin with, it is easier to, not be very clean with it. So I think it takes a bit of, how you call it, goodwill, or, um, being careful with what you do. And yeah, ultimately, Kings of War is, as we say, is a game of intention. You state your intention, then your opponent can have a look and agree, and then you just go on with it. Um, have you tried playing a game with a smaller scale yet, Mark, or are you still building your armies?
Oh no, I've been playing with them for years. That's how we kind of kind of started talking about it. No, I played quite a bit of it actually. So I have got way too many War Master figures, and I played War Master back in the day, and so I turned around and used those. But again, I got to give a tip of the hat to Luke, because that video he did also introduced me to Forest Dragon miniatures, and that was fantastic. And then I was talking to you about that, Clem, and I kind of got the 10 millimeter bug heavy again. And I turned around, and even on my FDM printer, I can print decent, they're small. So, I mean, you can print decent, miniatures on the FDM printer. In particular, I use the Forest Dragons because they're a little bit thicker. I mean,
Yeah.
they're built for resin, but, they print well. You got to watch a couple of them, but in general, they print really well and they represent great on the battlefield. So that's what I do and
They,
that's what I use. So, but,
they
back
are
to
very good models. Yes,
very
for
good
sure.
models. And then back to what you said, we don't worry about, it drives me crazy when somebody tries to do a flank charge on a millimeter of, your exposed base. We just don't do that. Mostly I play with Colin. It's mostly a travel thing or something we just do quick in the basement so we can clean it up. But it's just its intention, like you said, and just don't be a jerk about it and it'll all work out fine. So, it's just, we're just having a game. So,
Yeah, that's always a good recipe for it, and yeah, it's more a useful thing for you. Like everyone can just enjoy playing, on the go or without the same level of involvement on a smaller size, and then you just, yeah, as you said, just don't be an ass about it, and then it just works. Um, yeah, so the other thing that is usually a bit of an issue when you game at a different scale, and I know, for example, that's one of the reasons why I never really, stuck with Conquest, because Conquest is also Wreck and Flank, but on a different scale, is the terrain. You need to redo all of your collection of terrain if you go from 28 to 40 mil or 28 to 10 mil. Um, but ultimately, there are a bunch of options, and you can print some stuff smaller for the half size. And again, I think the key is because it is so much smaller, even if you have to redo a full table worth of terrain, well, it still fits in a fraction of a shoebox, right? So that's actually pretty easy to do. So
oh
yeah,
yeah,
I
and you can
think
just put one plate, basically, or two plates off on the resin printer and you're done. Whereas you probably would have gotten
absolutely.
four trees in 28 mil. So,
Yeah, it's not just for two plates or four plates. It's also because there are smaller models. The plates take an hour and a half, at least with my printer and my settings, or 2 hours max. And so, yeah, the printing time or the amount of resin really isn't the main issue. But yeah, no, that's I think a big strength to it. It's in a way more accessible, and it gives an opportunity for people to give it a try. So yeah, I think ultimately Mantic might give it a try. I'm not so sure though. We will see. I think they have a lot of other things on their plate at the moment. What do you think, Mark? Do you think they will actually do it at some point?
we'll see. They actually discussed it on the recent episode that came out from Adepticon on Countercharge. They actually kind of threw it out there. So, talking about 10 mil and, seeing what happened. And they did mention, again, the same thing, like Warmaster wasn't really commercially successful. So, will we see something launch out of Mantic? So, for right now, I don't think there's going to be anything short term. It's up to people like us to just kind of carry the torch and, say, hey, gaming in this scale is fun and it's convenient and it's fast and it's, you can travel easy with it and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's just kind of
Absolutely.
a thing. Yeah. And as far as splitting the community, they're not worried about doing it with champions either. So I don't think that it's going to split the community. I think it'll just give you another way to play Kings of War.
The Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe, so little time.
Elo elo, 520. Kacper from Kings of Warsaw Club here. 7-8th of June, 2,300 points, 6 rounds, 40 players, and only one to beat them all. Save the date, and I see you soon on Kings of Warsaw GT.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the way they have done Epic Warpath, for example, is a good example of how they could do it for a fantasy version. And yeah, I agree with you. And it makes sense to me that they wouldn't do this anytime soon because they have so much on their plate already. Like I just mentioned Epic Warpath, like it's an entirely new game that is coming out in a couple of months. Like the pledges will be delivered in a couple of months from the time of recording, and they've said they will support it and do more releases for it and so on. And so obviously they can't do everything at once, and it's a good thing because we can't buy everything at once and we can't play everything at once. So please, Mantic, do a smaller size fantasy game, but give it another couple of years or something before you get into it, so that we have time to, enjoy the toys we already have. But I think I remember a discussion with someone from Mantic. I don't know who it was. Might have been Clive at Clash of Kings 2 years ago, the first one in Nottingham, and he said that they might do it at some point, but if they ever did, they probably would do 15 millimeters. So like a strict divide the dimensions by 2, including for the miniatures, right? Because we didn't talk too much about this, but War Master miniatures that a lot of people use are 10 mil, so that's a third of the size of a normal, let's say, Kings of War miniature. And yet the bases we only divide by 2, not by 3, because divided by 2 already makes them reasonably small, and I don't think there's a need to make them smaller, right? But 15 millimeter miniatures, for me, the one inconvenience is you have more to paint on each one of them, and so I think it would take longer to paint the units. Maybe, perhaps, I don't know. Do you have experience painting 15 millimeter miniatures, Mark, or is there a system that you haven't played in the entire universe?
I think I played a 15 millimeter World War II game once, but I haven't painted any of the miniatures. But, so interesting. Next time I print an army up, as a matter of fact, I've got some Empire guys I'm going to be doing. I'll print them in 15 millimeter and see how it goes, and just mount them on the regular base and see how it looks. So, Will it take more time to paint? Yes. Will you be able to see it better? Yes. So,
yeah, it's a different experience, I guess. Ultimately, it's interesting from a painting perspective because it gives you a bit of a diverse thing to do. Like you can go from painting a big monster in 28 mil scale, or like regular Kings of War miniatures, then tiny ones and medium-sized ones. I think it keeps things interesting by doing different stuff. That just reminds me, I think Demon World was in 15 mil. Do you know this game? It was like with hex bases from probably 20 years ago. Maybe it was just a European thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't remember it all, Clem.
Yeah, so maybe it was just more a European or even maybe a French thing. I don't know. But I think I bought a few 15 mil fantasy miniatures back in the day. Maybe I have them somewhere still. But anyway, yeah, I think Mantic, if they do it, they probably ought to do it like they've done Epic Warpath, so 1 plastic sprue per faction, and then 3D printing for the rest. And I think from the gamer's perspective, that's a very good combo. That's a very interesting one. But when you look at this, there aren't that many 10 mil plastics out there for fantasy stuff. I think there's a company doing a bunch of them at the moment, and with big plans. Is it Wargame Atlantic?
Wargames Atlantic, are they doing 10 millimeter? I don't remember hearing about that, but that would be cool if they did. They're big into injection plastic. They're the ones that make me question whether or not everybody's lying to us when they tell us that it's expensive to do plastic. They do everything with plastic.
I think they have a bunch of STLs as well. It might be a different company now. I can't remember, but I've seen not long ago someone announce 10 mil, I think, samurai style armies and something else, and that they also had a whole fantasy range coming afterwards, so orcs and all sorts of stuff. So there are things coming out for people who would like to use plastics for their 10 mil gaming and not just 3D print. But when you look at it, there aren't that many options on the market right now. So that also could be an opening for Mantic, right? The same way as Epic Warpath kind of covers something that isn't so well represented. Like with all sorts of factions like this, I don't think there are many options, or it's not as saturated as a market as, let's say, skirmish stuff. So yeah, and in the meantime, I think, although I would love to see Mantic to publish, a blog post or something saying, hey, if you want to play Kings of War in small scale, you should do it this way. And then that gives us kind of a gold standard, and the whole community can, agree on one thing, and then maybe have events and tournaments and so on. But as a business, I don't know why they would do this. I think you'll agree with me, Mark, but from Mantic's perspective, it's nice when people, bring proxy miniatures and play Kings of War. That's better than not playing Kings of War at all. But in the end, they still need us to buy some models, and so they don't really have I think, a big advantage of, putting out, hey, here's how you can 3D print Warmaster miniatures or buy plastics from someone else and play our game. Because if in 2 years or whenever they actually want to come on the market, then it would be already kind of self-sabotaged. So, yeah, I guess, Mark, we will have to just do it on our own and leave it a bit unofficial, right?
Well, one of the things to think about, and you kind of mentioned it right there, was, what is the future for Mantic to release STL-only games? We've got Armada that way right now. It looks like Vanguard is going that way. Dreadball, they're going to reboot, which is probably why we never saw Dreadball hit the vault as an easy go, for them. And
Yeah.
that's a possibility too, is it just is developed that way and it can be sold that way, digitally, so they don't have to worry about printing and, inventory and shipping and, all that stuff. And they want to do it, but they just do it in an STL format, which is possible.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think one issue with this is if they ever release STLs for something they sell in hard plastics in 28 mil, then the risk that people will, even if it's a STL that is coated for 10 mil, people will blow it up and print it at 28 mil. And so for them, from a business perspective, it probably is an issue and probably is a non-starter. I don't know.
Yeah, you're probably right, because I am very guilty of blowing up the Forest Dragons up to 28 mil and printing them. People thought they would look bad, but they don't look bad. I mean, they're just kind of misproportioned a little bit because they're sculpted for 10 millimeter, but I don't care.
But it's a style.
So,
yeah, it's a style also. Like I really like the Forest Dragon style. There are other creators, right? I'm trying to remember of the names now, but you guys can find them out pretty easily online. But
yeah, well, like Pendragon makes them in metal, I think, and then there's Eureka Miniatures does it. But then I think you have Epic Miniatures. I think they're in Germany that prints a lot of stuff. They print it in resin.
Yeah, no, but I meant also sculptors, like other creators, like Forest Dragon, that do other ranges. Because
there's a couple of them out there.
Yes, I forgot the names because, to be honest, at this point I've been supporting Forest Dragon and bots almost everything they've done, and because it just fits so well. But at this stage,
one of the ones I'm looking at, Clem, is Polish Lightning Minis, and they are also over there on Gumroad, and which is where you find Forest Dragon 2. They've got some great stuff. They've got some Eastern Dynasty stuff, and then they have got the mercenaries. So, from
nice.
Warhammer, when they were doing the mercenary companies, like the Bears and the Duelists and all that, and the Albion Giants, they've got those in miniature all over. I will send you the link. So
nice.
They're very cool. Those have got my eye right now. So if I got some extra cash, I think I'm going to go and toss that on theirs. They're the other one that I'm very interested in. And they've got the Kislevites. Can't say that. But like long pirates and some Eastern stuff. But very interesting.
Nice. Yeah, I think now I remember I've bought some terrain from I think Cromarty Forge, and they also have different armies, like also Roman, like Imperial Roman army that you can use for Kingdom of Men, that type of stuff. And I think I bought some ogres from Greenskin Miniatures or something like this. But again, at this point, there are several creators that's called War Master style miniatures, and so any entry in War Master is covered at this point. And people have been using those models to also play, Warhammer or the old world in smaller scale. Because that's also, I think, to me, it sounds a bit crazy to individually base 15 mil models and make regiments and play the old world with. But it's crazy to play the old world at 28 mil scale anyway. So I guess that doesn't make a big change. I'm joking, obviously, but yeah. So there are tons of options out there if you wanna give it a try. But yeah, to get back on an official release at some point, I really think if Mantic is successful with Epic Warpath, then they could, basically do the same thing for fantasy. And maybe that's another interesting touch point for us now. And that is when you play with a smaller scale like this, obviously you can use the exact same rules that we have right now, or you could also do a bit of a different version like they've done for Epic Warpath. It's very similar to Firefight to some extent, but at the same time there are quite a few differences that really make it a different game. And it tastes similar, like it is a Mantic game, it is a sci-fi game in the Warpath universe, but it isn't Firefight, it's something different. And so I think Mantic could also do like an equivalent of War Master, which definitely isn't Warhammer Fantasy in smaller scale. It has a completely different rule set, right? And I think Mantic War Master would be awesome. Like, I really like the idea of War Master, but the rules, I mean, they are very interesting, but also very clunky. And sadly, it really is a good reminder of why we love Mantic so much, and that the rules are easy to learn and hard to master. And that's not just a marketing saying. And so you can really focus on what's going on the table and not open your book all the time. Versus every single time that I've played War Master, you scratch your head and like, okay, how is this weird case covered? And you open the book and you look at different things. It's like, it's not really covered. We have to come up with a solution and improvise it. So yeah, how would you like a Mantic War Master equivalent, Mark? Is that something that would attract you?
Well, this whole episode we've talked about playing it in half scale, and now, as you mentioned, would you play it a different way if it was in that scale? And so I guess I was going to ask you that exact same question. So would I play it? Yes, I would. And I would hope it would be as good as the regular Kings of War game. So, and similar to Champions. Champions going to have a little bit of a different rule set, kind of mostly Kings of War, but changed. So if you could have that same equivalent just to make it a little bit easier to play in 10 millimeter, like you said, take out the fiddly bits, I would be all in. So, because I would really like to see Mantic miniatures really small. So I think that would be really cool.
That would be the good part to it, right? Like you could definitely use whatever miniatures they actually release at that scale and then play the regular Kings of War rules on a much smaller table, like we mentioned, like the whole point of what we're talking about now. And still, when you've, grown your collection further and further, then you could potentially play like the War Master equivalent and then have this, compensate for the smaller size and give you a different gaming experience with the same miniatures. So that part would be pretty cool as well. Yeah, no, I think that's something I would enjoy. But please, Mantic, do it, but not this year, not next year, the year after, maybe, right? Like, do we agree that fourth edition probably will not have a small scale, paragraph or bunch of pages like we've had for Siege or they call the legendary battles in the compendium? I don't see it happen to have a small scale Kings of War in the next book, right?
No, they don't, but it would just cost them a page, just cut everything in half. Here's the bases, But again, they would like to sell some miniatures to you. So I think it would make sense to kind of hold off and just wait until they could actually produce it themselves and then sell you the miniatures. Because at the end of the day, they're a miniature company. They are not a rules company. So they need you to buy
Yeah,
miniatures in order for their families to eat. So, that's another way to think
yeah.
about it.
So that they can stay in business and keep doing awesome games. Absolutely, yeah. That's an important factor. But yeah, I think if you guys are, curious about it, or if you know people who already have War Master armies, um, all I can do is encourage you to give it a try, because it doesn't take so much to get started with it, right? Like you've printed everything you needed, Mark, just with your FDM printer. Um, I did a similar thing with my own resin printer, but you can also just buy the stuff if you don't have a printer. So there's not so much to do, right?
Oh, no, it's readily available. And you can cut your own bases out of cardboard, or you can just, cut them out of plastic card if you want. Just use like
Right.
1 millimeter thick. I've seen people do that because that's really easy to cut. So there's tons of options. And that's one of the things and I talked to you about it, Clem, is how do we standardize this a little bit? I think that would be a community thing until something actual came out. So, but for right now, I
I
jumped
agree.
onto Clem's half-size train. So,
Yeah, and I think you made the right choice. I think I think it works really well, and it's also quite future-proof because every future improvements to Kings of War or changes or new rules and so on, well, technically you are still playing exactly the same game. Like the ratios of dimensions and auras, ranges and spells, base sizes, and all of that stuff is kept. It's the same thing, and so. I think that really is the right approach to do it in a more, reliable or like stable over time way. And now, obviously, the day that Mantic releases something like this, well, we can hope that they keep something similar. And if not, well, we'll have had a good time with our armies between now and then, and we'll just, switch over to the official version whenever there is an official version. So
right.
I
Even
think
if they
it's
put
totally
out
worth
a
it.
different game. Yeah, even if they put out a different game for it, you still got them and you can still play half-size Kings of War. It's just, that's Kings of War. If it's a different type of game, as we mentioned, Epic Warpath is not miniaturized Warpath. It's a different game. So, you can
Yeah.
still pull out or get new miniatures, or I don't think I'd rebase mine, but, we'll see what they come up with at the end of the day. But hopefully they'll keep them square or
Yeah.
rectangular, and we'll be able to go. But I'd be open for it.
And to be honest, it's not like you lose a big investment or anything. Like, if for any reason at some point my 28 mil army, multi-based armies get invalidated, I would be pretty sad because they all represent like a significant investment in time and energy to paint them and assemble them, and also money because I mean, it is affordable compared to other systems, but it is still some money you put on the table. Versus the smaller scale, well, as we mentioned, it's painted faster, it's cheaper in the beginning, and so I've already, made a few armies kind of as side projects, and I know other players locally, like in the local gaming group, they've done sort of the same, and so it's not the same level of investment, and so you're not as sad if at some point you just put them on display shelf and don't play them as often. So yeah, I don't think there's any good reason to not give it a try. I think that's my end point here.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm going to ask you one more thing before we go, and that is, you actually had like a tournament or a get together where you guys actually played 10 millimeter Kings of War.
Absolutely, yeah. It was almost a year ago at that point, and the fun thing is we had a good amount of people who traveled in. So I don't even remember where I posted about it, but I announced the event like, "Hey, we're doing a Kings of War half-size event in Berlin in 3 months or whatever," and here's what we do. Like, here are the rules that we use for the event and how you can make your own army. and a few people actually from 2 or 3 hours away from us, or a lot further, like Andrew from Frankfurt, who now plays 28 mil in Frankfurt. He also traveled all the way to visit us in Berlin. So people built armies just for that. Like they printed them quickly or bought printed models, slapped some paint on it, and joined for the event. And it just went perfectly well. We had, I don't even remember now, 10, 12 players, something like this. We had a lot of fun. Like it was, in my opinion, just like a regular Kings of War tournament. Just we didn't take as much space in the gaming room, right? So that was good. And since then, I haven't organized another one, but it's nothing to do with the system itself. It's more to do with there's so many universes, so little time, as we say all the time, right? That I've been playing other stuff or doing other type of events, and so I still want to do more of those tournaments at some point in the future, but I haven't had the occasion. But I can testify it worked. It didn't create more drama or, rule questions than a normal tournament. It was a lovely event. People had a lovely time. People still talked about it to me yesterday when I did a gaming day, like, oh, yeah, we want to do another 10 mil, even because we still play 10 mil locally. Like yesterday, among the Kings of War players, we had some people play 10 mil, but people play 28 and people playing 10 mil. So it's still active, right? So yeah, you guys can do your own events. I've tested it for you. It works.
It works. There you go. Well, very, very cool. I just wanted you to share that story so people know it is possible. People do play 10 mil, so it's not just one-off. So, and people will travel. So it's kind of neat. It's a nice alternative.
Absolutely. And I think it's good that you mentioned, the standardization question and, agreeing with each other on how we do it, from a community perspective. And I'm biased, but I think we can agree dividing everything by 2 is easy enough. And I can assure you that if you do this, well, you have at least 2 locations in the world that I know of where you will find people that have exactly this and you can play games with. Well, that's not true. There's actually 3 because Alex, a good friend of Chris in Frankfurt that I met when I visited last time for the tournament and played with him, lovely guy. He started Kings of War also with his wife playing with half-size Kings of War. I'm not sure exactly. I think he might have told me how he got to this. But people out there are doing it, and it's because it is a lower investment. It takes less space and everything. It is a lower barrier to entry. And from there, people realize that's a very good game. I want to play more of this. Where are people who play this game and can I play with them? And then these people make a 28 mil army to play with other people. Or those other people make a 10 mil army as well. And then you can choose which size you play at. When I play with friends locally here, we always have to say, are we taking the 10 mil or the 28 mil? And it's fine. It's not more complicated than that. It doesn't split the community. It's just you need to agree on which version you're playing.
Yeah, same game, different size. That's basically
absolutely.
It,
so. Yes. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Very, very cool. Well, I'm glad we could get together and do this. Hopefully it'll inspire a few folks in the community. And Clem and I are always happy to talk about 10 millimeter Kings of War. So if you want to start a thread over there in the Facebook page or something like that, I'm
on
sure
Discord as well.
Yeah, Discord. Absolutely. Yeah. There you go.
And post pictures and I'll try also to post some pictures I've taken of games recently or next time I play. And maybe it'll inspire some people to give it a try. And hopefully us talking about it today gave you folks a few pointers and also inspired you to give it a try. All right. Mark, anything else we forgot to mention about small scale Kings of War?
No, I think we're good to go for now, Clem. But that was a good suggestion. We'll have to get like a little room or something like that on the Discord set up for 10 millimeter Kings of War, and then unless it's already there, and then we can chat and maybe post some pictures there too. So
on the MUP Discord, I'm not sure. I know on the French Kings of War Discord there is a small scale Kings of War channel, and people post pictures every now and then or ask questions. And yeah, it's cool. It's just one more way to play the game we all enjoy. So I support it. I think it brings something interesting to the table, literally. So there you go.
All right, very cool. All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up here then. And so, Clem, again, this was great getting together. And dear listener, I'm glad that you could join us today for a little 10 millimeter Kings of War talk. And until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.